Hi there, this is Sherry from WholeFoodsFamily.com. I'm here today to tell you a little bit about my course called Nourishing the Childbearing Years. Now, this course is a really good course for moms who are looking for a bit of a breath of fresh air around motherhood. Maybe you're feeling overwhelmed, stuck in certain areas, maybe you're tired or exhausted, and just looking to really take some time to focus on your own self-care and look at how you're nourishing yourself and your family. It's a 4-class series, and we we look at nourishment not only on the physical level but also on the soul level. So, the first class, we start with the nourishment of the body. So we look at the needs of the nutritional needs of women in the childbearing years. So that includes women who at some point want to conceive a child, to prepare preconception preparation, as well as for pregnant women and women who are about to give birth, or any woman who's basically given birth or breastfeeding. Um, During this time, we give a lot of our nutritional stores to our babies as they're forming, and then we continue to do that while they're nursing. So if you've ever given birth at any time in your life, this first class, we're going to talk about the particular nutritional needs that moms have, so that if we've never been pregnant before, or if we're pregnant right now, we can have this wisdom so that when we do get pregnant or do give birth, that we can go back and either replenish those nutrient stores that we gave up for our children, or make sure to optimize our nutrient stores while we're pregnant so that we don't feel depleted after giving birth. So this course really emphasizes really going back to that time and rebuilding as a foundation for vitality and the future of your experience with your health. We go into certain foods that are really nourishing for women in the childbearing years. We really want to focus on foods that are affordable and accessible. So we're not talking about, superfoods. You're not going to be told that you need to drink goji berries or something like that. But we're going to just talk about typical foods that you can find in the supermarket and how those foods can be optimally prepared to really nourish you, and which foods are really important and why they're important when you have a baby that's just developing in your womb, and how those foods benefit both the mother and the baby, and then also women later, whether they've given birth recently or even 5-10 years ago. So while the course focuses on moms of young children, just this wisdom of going back and replenishing is useful for any woman that's ever given birth. We're also going to talk about greens, because we're always told that greens are really healthy for us, but I don't know, take some greens out of the garden, start chewing on some kale. The texture and the taste, a lot of people don't really like the texture of raw kale, for example. So we're going to talk about how we can actually cook greens and eat them raw in ways that are more palatable and more digestible and easier to get the nutrients from them. So you're going to walk away with a technique for making raw green salad, for example, that has a texture that you'll really, really enjoy, as well as doing green smoothies, and how to prepare greens when you're cooking them so that they taste really, really good. The second class, we're going to focus on nourishing our soul as mothers. We're going to look at, for example, one of the exercises we're going to do is called the nurturing wheel. So we're going to look at all the different aspects of our life and how we can nourish ourselves in all those areas, where spiritually, psychologically, intellectually, things that nourish our soul. What are those things? We're going to really look at those things, and then look at how we can actually set up structures in our lives so that we can make room for these things that we want to do with our time. Oftentimes we have ideals and values and things that are really important to us, but we kind of never get past them being ideas or things that just stay in our head. So we're going to really look at how we can create a rhythm in our life that supports us to do the things that we want to do. Because if we want to be fully engaged as mothers, and if we want to be fully engaged in the world and other aspects of our being, those things that we want, the gifts that we want to give back to the world that are not just necessarily part of our gift of mothering, we really need to learn how to manage our energy. And partly, one of the ways of doing that is setting up structures that support the things that we want to do as a foundation, and as well as following our own rhythm and establishing what those rhythms are, and seeing how creating more rhythm in our life, creating more structures, actually gives us more freedom and more ability to be spontaneous without things falling apart around us. So that's a big thing that a lot of mothers struggle with, is just not really knowing how to manage our energy throughout the day. And the third class, we go into, again, now we're going back to nourishing the child, but we're going to start with the body. Just like our first class, we started with nourishing the body of the mother, and then going into the second class, we talked about how we're going to focus on the soul needs of the mother. So now we're starting in class 3 with the physical needs of the child. So we're going to talk about well, how can we optimize our child's digestion right from birth? And there's actually things that we can be conscious of while we're pregnant that can optimize our child's digestive capacities, or at least give them the initial start on optimal digestion, and then how we can actually carry that through and continue to feed our babies in such a way that their digestion is optimal. And from a naturopathic perspective, we look at digestion as being the seat of good health. So this is super important information for moms to have, to give their children a strong foundation for their future of their health. We're going to look at things that often trouble moms, that we tend to, when our children, for example, have a fever, rather than suppressing that fever through drugs, we're going to look at how we can actually be with the fever as moms, and to know when it is appropriate to treat, or when it's appropriate to just be with the fever, and how we can actually optimize the experience of the fever as a way of basically burning out the virus that is causing the fever. So we're going to look at, from again, more of a naturopathic perspective, what the purpose of a fever is, and how we can support the body to continue the healing process through a fever rather than suppress it. We're going to look at things like dental health for our children, how we can prevent and treat cavities in a natural way. We're going to look at, what are we going to look at? I need to look at my notes. Oh yes, important. We're going to look at Susan Weed's 6 Steps of Healing, which is a way, almost like a blueprint for how we can safely and responsibly use medicine, natural medicine. Looking at how we can go from the least invasive kind of medicine, from doing nothing, for example, to going through the different levels of different types of healing. At the bottom of that we have doing nothing, and at the top we have drugs and surgery, and then there's all these different avenues in between that we can explore before we actually get to the level of needing to do something invasive like drugs and surgery. So that's a really empowering framework for moms to give us the confidence to use natural medicine in a way that we feel really responsible for our children's health and capable of handling anything that comes our way. And finally, in the last class, we're going to talk about nourishing the soul needs of the child. So we're going to look at how, as mothers, we can look at our home as being a sacred space, and how we can deepen more into our femininity and embrace that aspect, to slow down and really be present when we're in the home. And not to say that, that's the only aspect of ourselves that we want to embrace as mothers. But what I find, and what other women find, is that when you really deepen into the yin or feminine aspect of yourself, while you're in the home with children, it just really makes it easier to yield to the experience of being with children. and to be able to just flow with things, because children, they flow, and we need to flow with them in order to not resist the experience. Um, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about sweetening the children's experience of life. We notice that children really tend to enjoy sweet foods, for example. So we're going to talk about how we can actually nurture sweetness in their life on both food and through things such as surprises and having sweet things for them to look forward to in their future. So creating rhythms that they can relate to and know what to expect, so that they can feel really grounded and know that there's an exciting future to live into. Um, as well, we're going to talk about rhythms and how we talked about how rhythms support us as mothers, but how we can also create rhythms for our children so that we're modeling for them how to establish rhythms in their life to sustain them and support them and nourish them, um, so that it just becomes a natural expression of how they live their life. And they don't have to be in the place of where a lot of us mothers are right now. We may not have had rhythm as children, and so it can be really challenging to adopt rhythm in our lives. So what we're trying to do is figure this out for ourselves and do it for ourselves, so that it can be easy and natural for our children, and for our daughters for example, when they become mothers. So they just can ease into that experience, because that's how they live their childhood, is seeing their mother or in working and thriving in her rhythms, um, so that they can not struggle and feel exhausted, tired, overwhelmed as mothers, and be able to, a lot of what this is figuring out how we can establish a feeling of that we have in our lives the structures that we need to support the things that we need to do in our lives. Because there's more that we want to do in the world than just be mothers. So how can we create a lifestyle in which we support and facilitate the needs of our children and our own at the same time, and not having that be a compromise, that we're not compromised and our children aren't compromised, but how we can find some sort of consensus between what we want to do in the world and still meeting their needs at the same time. So that's basically what the course is about. We're going to be sitting in circle, and it's going to be an intimate experience, and we're going to support one another and give each other ideas of how what we do in the home and what we do in our lives that make our experience of being mothers an enriching and rewarding experience. So that's it. If you have any questions, contact me through wholefoodsfamily.com. My email is sherry@wholefoodsfamily.com for more questions. And if you're finding this video and you can't come to one of my classes because you don't live anywhere near me, I intend to create this to be an e-course as well. So stay tuned, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you one day, either online in one of my classes or here in my living room.